My name is Randall Wall. I am one of the owners of Equity Real Estate here in Utah. We're the largest brokerage in the state. I am also a real estate investor. I've been president of the Investor Association for 13 years up to this year. And I maintain a full investment team as well as an agent team. And I closed 82 transactions last year as an agent with Equity Real Estate. So I have used seller financing as a super powerful tool to help me build my business. It taught me something. I had the opportunity to take $8,000 after a divorce and turn that into more than $1 million in a period of about 4.5 years. So this is a technique that helped me do that, helped me catapult personal wealth and personal gain forward, because in real estate, leverage is everything. So leverage is the key. And if you can figure out leverage and you can figure out how to make that work for you, it will make it your tool. So let me just go with a couple here of case studies. I'll show you a couple properties that I have done on seller financing that you might find interesting. So this is Starflower Way, which was a property that I bought from a couple that had been together for, they weren't married, but they'd lived together for 12 years. And so they, I think the guy got a new girlfriend and left his cute old girlfriend who was on the house loan with him kind of in the lurch, because he had been, like a lot of men with good intentions, had started to do some remodel. So he pulled down maybe 4 sheets of sheetrock in the master bedroom and had just left it there. And, there was a couple of things like that that were pretty small. And so they came to me and said, look, what can you do, Randall? Can you help me? And the little girl is crying. And so I said, well, let me look at the numbers. And she said, every agent we've talked to said that, we'd have to come up with $20,000 to close this because we just don't have equity, and, and they'd refinanced and, done whatever. And so I looked at it and she was right. It was, it was, they were into it 220 and it was 200,000. And so I said, okay, I can do it, but I can't pay any money. All I can do is take over your payments. Thank you, thank you, thank you. They're both very grateful and wanted to have me, take over the payments and ease their pain. And so I did. And so this was not a great cash flow tool. This isn't a story about how I made $1,000 a month on it. That one's coming. But this was one that it was on an adjustable rate mortgage. So I started out and I cash flowed $200, $250 after management expenses a month all in. So last year in 2019, it termed upwards and I was cash flowing about $88 a month after management expenses. And so I decided to sell it. I sold it, I think, in September, October of last year. So as I sold that property, what was interesting is that I sold it for a $130,000 net gain. So zero money in, $130,000 net gain 4 years later was pretty dang good. Now, if you're a mathematician, zero money in and $130,000 return is an infinite return. Now, yes, I had to do a little bit. I had to put up 4 sheets of sheetrock, sent my guys over to do that. Put it up, painted it, fixed the bedroom, etc. But that was a really good deal for me. So the next one I had was this one here. So this is a duplex down in Orem. I paid $3,000 down for that one. It was one where a guy had inherited it from his father and had, spent a bunch of money and not made the payments, etc. It was going to foreclosure. I let him stay in the property for 3 months. Never do that. That's not a good idea to let somebody stay in a property after you've purchased it. You can have a lot of issues. I had a few. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. But I got him out. That took me maybe 5 months to get him out of the property, but he was living in one side of it. But when I bought it, I got it for a singing deal. I think it was in the 130s that was owed on it. And this one was probably my oldest rental. So I think this was 2008. We bought it as a company, one of my friends and I, and then I took it over. But it's on the market right now under contract for $421,000. And the tenants have made the payments and we paid it down. So it's like $35,000 owed on the property. So that's a pretty good return for a $3,000 down payment. We had another property that I bought, which was almost the most that I've ever paid for a property. This is a little duplex and it's kind of crappy. It's up in Ogden. $20,000 down, and I put a little bit into it, not much, probably a couple $1,000, but $20,000 down on an 8-year carry. The other ones were 30-year carries, seller financing, but this one cash flows about $450 a month, so not a bad return. And if I can get rid of the tenants, which I really want to do, I can increase my cash flow by about $200 a month. So as you can see, this works really well. Now, if I was to look here and go, okay, that's great. What about, commercial property, right? The last one I put 20,000 down. The vast majority out of more than 100 that we have done over the years have been at $10,000 or less. So in any event, I bought one on Redwood Road. In an office park, a commercial building of office space. We put $50,000 down on it, $250,000 purchase price. 4 years later, it was worth $850,000. Now the 50 grand, I had a friend come in with part of that money, so that was good. So actually, it was about 25,000 out of pocket for me, and he came out with 25,000, and so we bought that one together. So if you don't have money, you can use leveraging your friend's money or your family's money to buy property. All right. So when does this work? This works anywhere and anytime that you can get a willing seller to agree to carry the note for you. Okay. Now, I'll talk about some of the disclosures that you should use later on, and some of the ones that we use in all of our contracts, just to make sure that we're safe and that we're protected. But you want a willing seller who is willing to let you do this. Now, why will they do it? I'll cover some of the reasons why somebody would say, yes, we would consider doing a seller finance. Sometimes it's tax reasons. They don't want to take a large sum of money year one, because maybe it'll push them over the edge, or they'll have tax ramifications that are not effective for them. And so it can be tax reasons. It can be where most agents walk away from somebody who has no equity in the property. So they said that the one I talked about with the young couple, they said they talked to like 4 or 5 or 6 agents, and all of them said the only thing you can do is a short sale. We can't do anything for you. They walked away. Well, I have never gotten less than $10,000 as a commission on any property that we have seller financed and given to another buyer. In fact, I don't know any of my agents who have. Every seller finance property is worth a minimum of a $10,000 commission. And it doesn't matter whether there's equity or not, because people will pay more than actual value if they have easy financing and easy terms. If a property is worth $400,000 and somebody offers it to sell it to me for $1 million, am I going to say yes or no? Well, I'm going to say yes, as long as you set the price and I'll set the terms. Because if I'm renting it out for $1,500 a month and the terms are $800 a month in payments, I'm going to jump all over that. So if they can't come to you on price, make them come to you on terms. But that works out really well. We do a lot of flips. So I think we've got 7 that we're doing this month. We're buying another 3. We had 12 a month and a half ago, and so we've been selling them as quick as we can get them finished. But more than half of the properties that we are flipping these days are seller financed. And that's great, because typically we're paying 12% on private money or 12% in hard money when we purchase investment property. It doesn't matter, whether it's single family. It doesn't matter whether it is, multifamily, et cetera. It's typically 12%. So I sold a property last month where we made $96,000 profit on it. And we came in with, I think it was $25,000, took over the payments that were about $1,000 a month. The purchase price was about $245,000. It needed some work. And then we paid them out another $45,000 or $50,000 on the back end when we sold it. But we cleared almost $100,000. But what's nice about that is if I had been using my private money guys, it would have been $24.50 a month in holding costs. And I sat on that one for 5 months just because I had so many going at the same time. But it was easy to do when it was, $1,000 or less a month in holding costs or in monthly payments. And so if you're doing flips, consider seller finance, because a lot of people will say, yeah, we'll seller finance it for some money down, and if you're in and out of it in 6 months, no problem. Now, people will ask, I had somebody send me a private message that said, do they check your credit? What about bank, financing? Well, I hate bank financing. Occasionally I'll do it. Right now, the interest rates are so darn low that if you could do it, it's not bad, for sure. But I have never had anybody ask to see my credit. When I was new in the game and 20 years ago, I offered to show my credit to one person. They're like, oh, okay, we'll look at it. They didn't care. So if it looks like you can take care of the deal, if you look credible and people feel confident that you're going to be able to take care of them in this, they're going to do it with you. They're going to do the transaction with you. So the answer to, where can you do this is pretty much freaking anywhere. So you got an office building, you can't afford it. What's the worst thing if you make an offer? What's the worst thing they're going to say? No. And if it gets really bad, maybe hell no. Okay. But you're going to get some yeses. Now, Carlton Sheets is, the old dog of real estate. 15 years ago or 20 years ago, he was on all the late night infomercials. Buy my course for, $99 and make $1 million. And it was the world's thinnest course. It looked like, a handful of paper pretty much. But there was one thing that I learned from it. And it was, if the average income or average profit that you're going to make from a transaction is $10,000, which is pretty thin, and it takes you 100 no's to get to one yes, then every no is worth $100. And so I tied that with one of my coaches a few years ago, Patrick Snow. He's a published author, but he said, just remember, Randall, some will, some won't, so what, next. And so if you never ask, you're never going to take advantage. God says, ask him for whatever it is you need. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. So if it's good enough for God, it's good enough for everybody else out there. So just ask. And you've put a great deal together. You've got a good price on a property. See if you can get a seller financing component as well. I wholesaled one, I think, to Clay Rockwood a couple of years back. And I got it to him at a premium. It was like a $600,000 property. And the reason we were able to move it to him is because I got seller financing. He's coming down on this, $600,000 property, and the payments on it were $1,500 a month. And so I told the owners, I said, if you can do a seller financing on it, we'll pay you $1,500 a month. How about we do that for another 6 months? That'll give you an extra $9,000. And they said, yeah, sure. We'll like an extra $9,000. And what it meant to me was an extra $20,000 because I was able to wholesale it for a better price because it had such easy financing. And so do it everywhere, do it often, do it whenever you can, because it's not in your credit. It doesn't affect your credit at all. It is a massive leveraging tool, because no matter how much money I make, or if I have big bucks like Steve, or Andres or Amelia, there's going to come a point when I can't do any more. I'm either going to max out on the number of loans I can get, or max out on money or reserves or something else. But there is no maxing out on seller finance. So we had one of my agents, Larry Fawcett, when the market turned downward, she was working with mostly Hispanics. And they all had I-10 numbers, and so they were getting it's called an I-10 loan, which is like a tax ID number. And that just, the bank stopped doing it. And she's like, Randall, my business has died. What do I do? What do I do? And so I taught her seller financing. We went on the Hispanic radio show and did an ad that said, if you have 10 grand and a steady job, we'll find you a house. And she closed 20 to 35 transactions a year, just seller financing, and was double siding a lot of those. And so it's really good. So every property works. If you have a newer property that barely cash flows, I don't want a property that doesn't cash flow. Would I take one? Yes, if it was new. If it had, no deferred maintenance on it, it looked like I wasn't going to have to do anything. And we actually had that happen. We bought a property in Woods Cross where the guy had built the property, him and his wife had built it, and then he died in it all within like 6 months of their moving into it. And she said, I just can't go back into that property. I just can't do it. Will you take it over? And we were like, okay, it's not going to cash flow, but yeah, we'll do it. And, that property has gone up like, $200,000 in, the last 4 years. So for no money down, take over the property, a pretty good deal, and it's just the ways to slice and dice this are infinite. So we had another property that we looked at, and I need $20,000 because similar situation. The guy that owned the property had died. His parents couldn't bring themselves to go into the property. And they said, we just want $20,000 down on it so that you can, so that we can bury our son, pay for the burial costs. And then you can take over the, the loan that's in his name, the payments, et cetera. And so I went out and found a guy in the military, because most military guys will have nothing when they retire, because they don't own any real estate. So all they've got is a pretty thin military retirement. So this guy was a major in the Air Force. And I said, hey, Brandon, here's the deal. I've got this property. It's going to have this much equity in it. It's going to have this much cash flow in it. I need $20,000 because I had all my money out on other projects. And I said, for $20,000, I will give you a third. So actually it was 30%. 30% of the equity and interest and ownership in this property. And so we did that. And he got 30%. We had 70%. And then we watched that thing double in price and, and just, move up from there. So really good. So there's a few things you need to be aware of. So when you're doing this, I personally do not like the forms on the multiple listing service. I just don't. My attorneys have drawn up other forms and we use those as well, but you can use the MLS, and here's how you do it. You use the forms on the MLS, you use an addendum, and you just copy and paste. And so I have a bunch of disclosures that I copy and paste because I don't necessarily want to show them my credit. I have an 823 as of yesterday, but I still don't want to show them my credit. I don't want to agree that if the bank calls the loan due, that I'm going to refinance the property. And so those are terms that you're going to find in fact, we can look at that, I probably don't need to, I'll just tell you about it, but that you're going to find in the seller financing paperwork that's on the MLS that agents use. And so it is not really good for sellers. It's not really good for buyers. But here's the problem with me putting down that I am going to refinance if the seller calls the loan due. So let's say that right now the seller is highly motivated and they're facing bankruptcy if they can't unload this house, they're in divorce, all these things are going on in their lives. And they just really need to get out from under this. And so they'll agree to basically anything because you're going to save their credit, save their life, everything's going to be good. But fast forward 2 years later, now the seller's got a new honey and he is wanting to buy another property. And he can actually do that because under most of the HUD guidelines, and you have to check this because they change all the time, but we just did one of these, a few months back. If you can prove that somebody else has been making the payments for the last year, those won't count against your debt to income ratio. So even if they sell or finance a property to you, you make the payments for a year, you're on time, et cetera, or more, it typically doesn't count against them for purposes of refinancing. And we've had a number of sellers that have refinanced. In fact, one guy was facing foreclosure. We saved him. We brought his property to current. He moved to Europe for 2 years and came back, and his credit was perfect because we've been making on-time payments for 2 years. And so his credit improved and he was able to qualify for another loan on a new house. And so I know that works, but you don't want to do that, because now what happens, oh, the guy's ticked off and says, I don't want that on my credit. Maybe someday you might not make the payments. It doesn't matter that you made the payments for 4 years, but he's worried about this. So he calls his bank and says, hey, these guys have bought my property. And they, try and call the note due. And so it just gives the seller a way to screw you out of the deal that you made as a buyer, because maybe the property's gone down. It doesn't always go up. There are dips in the market before it climbs up. It may go up like this over a 50-year term, but if you remember, 2008 to like 2016, it was a, little, it was a little all over the place. It just is something. So I don't do that. So one of the things that I do is, obviously I'm an agent and a broker. I always disclose that I'm a principal in the transaction. That's really important. I make sure that I disclose and clearly state that all profits whatsoever are mine and mine alone, and that the only money that the seller is entitled to is the money that's agreed to or stipulated on the contract, okay? There have been people who have gone to court, and if that wasn't in there, they ended up paying a lot of money to the seller. So it says that that I have the right to assign ownership. So I do everything in a trust, because in section 19 of the purchase contract, it says that you can take title in any entity or any business entity that you have ownership interest in. So I make the offer in the name of a trust. I put the property into the name of a trust. And if I want to sell later on, or I want to wholesale it, I do it with a trust. I have wholesaled, I don't know how many short sales. Lenders typically didn't want you to wholesale a short sale. They would never take language like and or assigns. But with a trust, they didn't care, because the trust made the offer, the trust closed on the property, they're happy. And it didn't matter that I sold my interest in the trust for $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 to somebody else or to another investor. It also, doing it that way, saves you title fees, because you don't have to close multiple times. You close once, you get title insurance on it, then you just sell your interest in the trust. And so it works out pretty well. But I always disclose that, that I have the right to, even though it's in 19, but I always put it in the addendum, to assign it to any entity, trust, corporation, et cetera, based upon my tax or business needs. And so it's clearly defined twice. I also, if I'm going to wholesale the property, I want to get permission to be able to take pictures of the property, to show the property. I want to make sure that everybody is acting solely in their own interest. So for agents, you can use the seller, for sale by owner agreement that's unrepresented, seller, basically say, I'm not representing you, but I clearly state that as well in my addendum. And I just say that, again, I say the buyer hereby states that he is giving clear and constructive notice of his intent to make an immediate or future profit from the real estate purchase contract and or purchase, sale, disposition, etc. of this property, or any ways mentioned in this contract or others that may not be mentioned. So what have I done? I've said, I'm going to wholesale this property. I'm going to keep this property. I'm going to sell this property. I'm going to fix and flip this property. I'm going to do whatever to this property that I want to do, and I'm going to make a profit on it, and it's all mine. And after, the fiasco of wholesaling last year, I went to the division. They had no issues with my doing it in a trust, but I added this disclosure on top of the initial one, stating that said profits for the purposes of disclosure should be deemed to be significant, whether a profit or loss is realized or not by the buyer. That realized profit could range from as little as $10,000 to $1 million. And most people are going to look, $1 million, whatever. But the fact is that I have just disclosed that I might make a huge profit. And so if I make $100,000 on a deal, somebody can't come back to me and go, well, yeah, it was fair at the time, but I didn't realize you're going to make 100 grand. And then I tell them and ask me how I know this. Well, yeah, but I put $100,000 into the property because your property was beat to crap, and so we put 100,000 into it. And that's what it took me to make $100,000 on it. So when I disclose between $10,000 and I'm able to say, and look, right here in section 6A, you signed that you understood that I was going to make a profit between $10,000 and $1 million. So if it was okay for you then, why isn't it okay now? Right? So that's something. And then I say that I will have, the buyer has no limitations in that he or she can remodel, sell for profit, sell an interest. So tons of disclosures. You're seeing a lot of disclosures here. That I can change partners or beneficiaries at any time prior or after closing. So I don't have to disclose that, but I'm just stating it because you can't over disclose that I can change anybody in the contract, that I can change my trust, I can change my business entity, etc. And then I have the right to assign this property specifically or the contract itself to a for-profit to another entity or person. And so I'll use that one sometimes as well. So it's just good. And I like to disclose that the purchase price may or may not represent a discounted purchase price that could be less than is sold elsewhere. And I state very clearly, if the seller were to remodel, clean out, wait, and market the property in a more traditional manner for a full retail sale over time, they would likely receive a greater profit. So what have I done? I've said, if you sell it with an agent on the market, cleaning it up and fixing up whatever else, you're going to get more money. But the as-is purchase and immediacy of the offer to purchase the property in its as-is condition is of value to the seller and may offset other considerations in that both parties agree that the purchase price was fairly negotiated without fraud or duress between all parties. Fairly negotiated means a willing buyer and a willing seller and whatever you agreed on, and that's fairly negotiated. So going back to the one that I flipped for almost 100 grand, let me tell you something. I never take advantage of people. I don't. I actually knew that this was an old guy who was moving into a senior living center, and he was there with his niece, who was, the executor of his estate. And I walked over to him, and I had, been down that street before and talked to him once before. Had bought other houses on that street, and I just said, "Hey, I understand you're moving. If you want, I will sell your house for free. I will list it for free. I will list it for nothing. Now, at equity, we pay $4.99 a transaction, right, as agents. So it cost me $500, but I didn't care. I said, I'll list it for free. You don't have to worry about it. You're going to have to pay the buyer's agent, 3%, but I'll list it for free for you. I'll try and help you out because I just tried to do that. And they said, well, look at all this junk here, and, it's partially remodeled, and, it's got this wrong and that wrong and whatever else, and we're just really worried about it. And I said, well, let me tell you what, I'm heading out of town. I'll send one of my guys over. He'll make you an offer on the property. If, and the offer will be for the property in its as-is condition, because people want it easy. And if you can make seller financing easy, they go for it. And they did, and this guy did. If you like the offer, take it. We'll buy the property. If not, we'll list it for free. I'll do what I said. We'll list it for free. So I'm on my trip, and I get a text saying we're buying that property down the street. And so they were happy about it. So it's good. I want to disclose that there is a due on sale clause. Okay, typically it's the seller that has to disclose that or should disclose that. But under RESPA and everything else, you're supposed to disclose that, there's a due on sale clause. Now, there's no due on sale jail. People are going to ask, well, what does that mean? It's against the law. The bank can call the note due. Well, out of all of the hundreds, and I'm sure it's more than 100 that we have done, I have never had the bank call the note due, not even one time. Okay. And it's not against the law. It's just a contractual thing that says, hey, I'm making the loan as the bank to you, the owner. And if you try and, sell the property to anybody else or do seller financing or do anything else, I may have the option to call the note due and ask for all the money, right now. And so they have that option. That's never happened. Now, I did have somebody call me once and say, and I get a power of attorney. We're doing a seller finance. There's a couple of things you're going to want. You're going to want that are absolutes. Number one, you want an authorization to receive information, so an AOR. You want a power of attorney prepared by a title company specific to that property. So it's a limited power of attorney. You want them to put you, and I'll talk about this in a minute as well, on the accounts where you can log in and make sure payments are being made and check the balances, etc. And talk to the lender, and that the lender knows that you have the right to talk to them about the loan. So they said, hey, it looks like title has changed. And I said, yeah, it was put into a trust. And, and I quoted them, the Garn St. Germain Act of 1984 says that you can put a property in a trust without benefit, meaning that without prejudice, meaning that the banks can't call, the note due or exercise the due on sale clause if you put it in a trust for your own benefit. Well, typically the trusts are named the address of the property these days, or the person's name. I've named them, Blackberry Trust, Retired Widows and Orphans Trust, or whatever else, just having fun with it. But I never heard from them again. And on another one, over 20 years, I think they asked me for additional information. I just ignored them for like a year, and they never asked again. And so they would, send an email, and I just ignored it. So, and that's the one that I'm selling, that's the duplex that I'm selling down in Orem. So it works. So disclose the fact that there is a due on sale clause. Okay. And here's what I say to them. I say that if the due on sale clause is exercised, that I will make an attempt to finance out of the property, or I will title the property back into the name of the seller in exchange for a long-term lease option agreement with substantially the same terms as the seller finance agreement. So basically it means that I get to collect, the property benefits. I'm collecting the rents, I can sandwich lease option, I can do whatever, no problem. It means that I can buy the property for what I agreed to, and I can also, in that agreement, I'll state that each payment to them is applied to the loan and directly to the loan balance. And so basically it's just semantics, but it's the same exact thing. It's just a long-term lease option. So I've done a couple of those with Utah Housing, which watches their loans pretty quick, pretty closely for people who have been looking to do seller financing. And so instead of using a trust, I'll use bond for deed or a long-term lease option agreement, because either one works. I've got one, friend that's making $700 a month and has for a long time off of something they put down $14,000 on a seller finance deal. So it works out good. It states that I'll state that the earnest money, most cases, will be delivered at closing. Now, if I don't close on it, I am paying them the earnest money. But I don't need the hassle. I make a lot of deals, a lot of offers. I don't need 20 out there with, $2,000 each sitting in, out there in the atmosphere. So I'll just say that, it's the earnest money is $2,000 and it's payable at closing. If the buyer defaults, that within 7 days of cancellation of the contract due to said default, that the sole remedy of the buyer is to keep the earnest money, and that's what I do. So it says, should the seller fail to close by settlement deadline specified? Because that happens sometimes. Sometimes another investor will try to come and snake the deal from you, offer them $5,000 more or something. And so, they'll want to not close. So it says that, that I extend it automatically by 5 days or until the seller is ready or able to close, which may be longer, and that any extension beyond 5 days past said deadlines shall be at the buyer's sole discretion and direction, okay? So if the seller can't deliver clear marketable title, then, I'm going to extend them by however many days beyond that date is needed to obtain clear and marketable title, allowing the seller to perform and the buyer to perform and purchase the property. One thing I like to do anymore is I like to give them notice that I am going to have the right to file a notice of interest, memorializing this agreement. So basically, I get them to give me the right to file this notice of agreement stating that we have a purchase contract on the property, the right to purchase the property, because that means that they cannot give clear title to anybody else. So if somebody else comes up and says, I want to pay you $1,000 more than Randall, ask me how I know this. They can't try to hold me up for $1,000, which, to be honest, $1,000 I'm going to pay. 5 or 10, maybe not, depending on the deal. Probably not. And so if I file a notice of default, they can't do anything. In fact, I think we had one last year. I filed, or not a notice of default, I filed a notice of interest on it that was from a couple of years back, and all of a sudden they're trying to sell it to another investor because they decided, oh, we're going to sell it to an investor. That didn't work out because I had the notice of interest. 3 years later, we're going to sell it again. And so the investor calls me and says, what do you want to release this notice of interest on the property? And so $20,000 was the release fee. And so, it's worth something to do. It can work out well for you. Some other disclosures that you want to have is that the seller agrees that he or she understands fully and to their satisfaction that the real estate purchase contract and all the addenda is complete, and that they have not relied on any statements, any verbal statements that I have made or that we as the buyers have made. That everything that we have talked about is memorialized in writing in the agreement. That complies with not only the statute of fraud stating that real estate transactions have to be in writing. It's just very clear. Now, one of my friends used to record at title every closing he would go to with the sellers and make sure they understood everything. So he had it in writing and in a recording as well. And then if you're using hard money, you want to disclose, like if you're saying you're offering a cash purchase, so I might say, I'll offer to purchase it cash, and then down, if I'm using hard money or private funds, in the addendum, I disclose, for the purposes of clarity, cash as mentioned by the buyer shall mean either immediate cash from the buyer, non-traditional funding, or a loan from any private lender who can fund in the timeline specified by the purchase contract without going through an institutional lender, okay? We have never had an issue with anybody on these. None of the people go, oh, that's not cash or anything else. But to be honest, to be legal, to be strictly truthful, that's what we do and that's what we say. And then I also include that all personal property shall be removed from the property prior to settlement, unless otherwise agreed to. And anything left on the property shall be the property of the buyer to dispose of, having no marketable intrinsic or material value to the seller. Because we bought one up on Capitol Hill and there was like a squatter in the property, and the next thing I know, and we didn't even know about him, I'm getting notice from an attorney for $14,000 because we've tossed out his treasures, which, yeah, there was no treasure there. We just answered that and said, pound sand. We don't know who you are. Go back to the seller because we didn't ever see you in the property, and you never showed up when we were there working on it. So we just tossed everything out that was in the property because there was no value there. But people can do that. We state if we're going to that buy it as is, that we're buying it as is condition. And then here's the thing that I do one of two things. I either state the terms of this addendum shall survive closing by a period of 50 years, which by then, some of us will be dead, or they'll be dead, or who knows what. Or you can put down that, the terms of this agreement shall survive closing. Now, here's another thing I want to talk about is how you make the payments and what you do. This should be in your addenda as well, and I would probably make sure that you write down this shall survive closing as well, because otherwise it's an executed contract. It's not in force after closing. So one of the things that I do in there is I state that I am going to have access to their account with the mortgage company, because they all have online accounts. And so they're going to give me the username and password, and they're going to agree not to change that username and password. And that if for some reason they have to change the username and password, that they're going to give me the new username and password, as soon as possible. And I make that a contractual agreement so they can see that the payments are being made and that I know it's going there, because in no cases do I want to pay the seller. I never, ever, and I suggest that you don't either, pay the seller and expect them to make the payments, because they just won't. And it'll be 4 or 5 months before you find out that somebody puts a notice of default on your door that the payments haven't been made for 5 months because the seller thought a vacation or a new car or something else was more important. So that's kind of a big deal. If for some reason on one transaction and one transaction only, I have used escrow specialists. So they're an escrow company based out of Ogden. And the only reason I use that is because these people had a bunch of personal accounts and business accounts with that lender. And so, me being able to access it would have been giving me too much information or insight in their private, affairs. And so with that one, I pay escrow specialists. It costs me like $25 a month. And so they get the payment from me, and then they pay the mortgage company and then give the seller whatever else is left or whatever else is agreed to. But you should, I just always try to make the payments directly myself, because who needs a middleman? And, $300 a year or whatever it is, I can use that just as well as anybody else, or donate it to charity. I will not give you the contract, but I will send you all a copy of the disclosures in a Word file that you can, in fact, download, copy, and paste. If you look down there in the chat bar, I'm going to put the email address. So I'm going to have you email William. So equitywilliam@gmail.com. Okay. So Janice Hansen says, great information, but I wouldn't dare get started without mentoring. Do you offer mentoring? Yes, I do offer mentoring. I will do that. My agents, I mentor for free. So I do that for free, but if you're, anybody that's not one of my agents, we can work something out. I'll be happy to help you do that, because it is just such a powerful tool. It's all about leverage. It's all about having the right disclosures, and it's about asking. If you learn one thing from this, the first thing that I'm going to give you the top 3 things that you should take away from this, in my opinion. The first thing is ask. Don't be afraid to ask, because the worst thing that happens is they say no. Okay. The second thing is that all you need to know is that seller financing is a viable concept whereby you can leverage no money, other people's money, or very little of your own money into incredible gains. Because, where I got the $20,000 from Brandon for 30% of the property, and I clear $200,000, 6 years later on that property myself, that's an infinite return. I leveraged his money to make my $200,000, and he's happy because his $20,000 is now, a lot of money, $60,000, $70,000 or more. So it's a great return. Plus, you get some rents and whatever else throughout the year and some tax benefits. You can slice this so many different ways. So if you want to use somebody else's money, you can use their money to give them an interest in the property. You can give them, let's say that you don't need the tax write-offs and they do, you can offer them the tax write-offs. I'll give you the tax write-offs on this property. So you're gonna get 30% plus the tax write-offs. Or you know, it's, you know, if the rents are coming in, you know, you're going to get put, you know, $20,000 down, and I'm going to give you, you know, $500 a month rent for the first year, and then X amount of rent for the second year. So if you have a hard time being creative, call me, you know, contact me. I will be happy to be able to, you know, help mentor you, help you structure it, help you think outside of the box, because this is a huge tool. So that's the second thing. And the third thing would be Janice's answer, which I gave her, which is, you know, get somebody to mentor you. If you don't know how to do it, get somebody to walk you through it. You know, my team and I, we do these all the time. So just remember, ask. You know, you got nothing to lose by asking. Realize that you can be creative and slice and dice it however you want, because people are always like, I don't have any money. And I'm like, so what? You know somebody with money, you know me. If you find me a deal and you need, you know, you need money to finance the deal, come talk to me, because if the numbers work, I'll do it. You know, I'll partner with you, or Steve, or, you know, there's a lot of people out there that'll do it with you. William, you know, a lot of people will partner with you if you find the transaction. If you're an agent, you don't understand seller financing, come meet with me. Let me show you, you know, what's great about equity and how I, as your broker, can help you take advantage of all of the different tools that you're not getting elsewhere. Seller financing, cost segregation. You know, there's so many things that I've had more than $150,000 that I've spent in my own education in real estate. I am happy to share that with you. And the average broker who's making 65 or 70,000 a year hasn't done that, I can guarantee you. So that'd be a good thing. Janice will try and post it. So contact William, put in your email address to William, and we'll make sure that everybody gets it by you know, the end of the week. We'll get it out by tomorrow afternoon. William and I are busy. We've got some closings today and tomorrow and that, but it's been great being here. Is there any other questions? If somebody wants to print or type a question in the chat box, I'm happy to. Thank you, Priscilla. Says thanks so much. But powerful tool. Put it in your suitcase and carry it around with you, because other agents are running away from deals. Other investors are running away from stuff they just don't understand. This is money. It is literally, you know, every seller financing transaction has a commission and has an opportunity there if you can just find it. Thank you, one and all. And I wish you well. I hope you have a great week. And thanks for your time. And go out there and do some seller financing deals and build up your own portfolio. Take care.